What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikaPikaPaPa, and this Technicolor dream coat of Pokemon awesomeness that you're staring at here is my interpretation of the 20 biggest chase cards from the Sword and Shield era. Now, we have been talking about Sword and Shield a lot on this channel, right? And that's because I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think the window of opportunity to buy a lot of these awesome products, at least at MSRP or below, is rapidly closing, right? We're getting into year number 2 of Scarlet and Violet. We're starting to see more and more products flip to sold out on the Pokemon Center. Matter of fact, Vivid Voltage Elite Trainer boxes recently flipped to sold out. We've seen Fusion Strike flip to sold out. I think we're going to see that more and more. And so as we get into that phase, I want to start talking and kind of preparing for what next phase might look like. Like when, believe it or not, the day when all the Sword and Shield products are sold out, like what are going to be some great investments? What are going to be some awesome cards to hold? And what are some cards that might be a little hyped right now? Now, what I did here is, this is really interesting. So I started with the Vivid Voltage set and I went all the way to Celebrations, and I started with Vivid Voltage simply because it's got that Pikachu card, which I really like. We're going to talk about that later on. And then we go into Shining Fates, right? And everything else in between is in here. And I just basically picked the 20 chase cards that I like the most and that I think are the most expensive and I think have the best opportunity for long-term price appreciation, right? So in this graph, you've got the set they're from, you got the card name right there, and then I took it a couple steps further, right? So I have the PSA 10 population in that first colored graph right there because we're going to talk about that a lot in this video. I'm going to tell you how I think that affects the investability and the long-term price appreciation for the cards on this list. Then in that blue column under total, that's the total number of cards that have been graded at PSA. Now, we're going to talk about that because the total number of cards graded at PSA, that includes 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s, 6, 5, all the way down to 1. Now, one would assume that most people, when they're sending to PSA, are sending the best of the best cards. Now, there's different levels of pre-screening. Some people are better, some people are worse, but at the end of the day, whenever I'm talking about a total population, I'm saying most people sent their cards to PSA because they want a 10. Like, most people aren't sending cards thinking, hey, I really hope I crush an 8, right? So at least in the sender's mind, a lot of these are ones people are sending in hopes of getting a 10. Then in that other color right there, we have PSA 10 percentage. So that's basically out of the total number of cards that were sent, how many of them came out in a PSA 10 holder. Now, the popularity column in one is something that's really interesting and I wanted to talk about. I was trying to layer in a way to separate cards based off of what I think is their overall popularity. And who am I to judge what is popular and what isn't? So I thought back, how can I do this? Well, every single month we do a grading report video. We look at the actual grading numbers from the companies like BGS, SGC, CGC, and PSA, and we really focus in on PSA because they are the biggest and the baddest. And every single month we look at the most graded characters in the TCG space at PSA. So what I did was I went back to a year. If any name on this list was on that PSA top graded character list, I put it as a popularity of 1. And if it wasn't, I put it as a popularity of 2, only because I want the colors to change, right? I want green to represent good and red not to represent bad, but I want red just to say it's not as popular as green. So I did that simply so, again, when I'm talking about big data, I like to use color representations. So that's why I did it. So if you see like a Ray on here, right? Like it's got a 1 next to it. That's because Rayquaza was actually on the most graded PSA character list at one point in time. You'll see names like Giratina on there. You'll see names like Lugia on there, right? But then when you start looking at Blaziken and Moltres and Tyranitar, right? Like we've never seen them on that list. So they got a 2 next to them. And then of course I had to go ahead and add the prices. So I went to Pokedata.io and I pulled the PSA 10 prices for all of these cards. And I also color coded it, right? And it doesn't mean that red is the most expensive, meaning it's bad. It simply is a way to gradient all this out. Now, what I'm going to do with all this information is I'm going to look at them in sets of 2, sets of 3, and we're going to talk about how all of this could or might indicate some future price appreciation or at least some investability in some of these cards. These is a ton of fun. I enjoyed putting this video together more than I can possibly say. I loved looking at the slabs. I loved digging into the numbers. Like this was a ton of fun and I really walked away with some awesome learnings and I hope you do the same. And I also hope that you find value in this content, so much value that you're willing to hit that subscribe button because it means so much to me. I also hope you like it enough to give me a thumbs up, and if you have questions or comments, you drop them down below. Those 3 small things go a long way in helping my small channel out, and I really, really appreciate it. So the first pair that we're going to look at right here are some that, hey, listen, these are epic cards, right? You got the Charizard from the Celebrations Classic Collection. You got the Charizard from Shining Fates, but look at that first number right there. That's the PSA 10 population. Both of these have over 17,000 cards in PSA 10 slabs. That is a ridiculously big number, right? And then when you look at the Shining Fates one, the gem rate is almost 80%. That was the highest gem rate out of all of the cards. And we all know that those Shining Fates ETBs are still available on the Pokemon Center right now. So listen, this card is great. Everybody loves a good Zard. Everybody loves a Chase Zard in a PSA 10 case. But coming in at $167, I'm not sure if there's a ton of upside here. There are still going to be more PSA 10s that come into circulation, right? Like everybody knows there's a bunch of Shining Fates ETBs still out there. So when we talk about from an investability standpoint, purely from a price appreciation perspective, I don't know if this one's going to give you the biggest lift. Is it going to grow over time? Probably, right? It's a Charizard in a PSA 10. But when we look at some of the other cards on this list, I don't know if this one has got the giddy up and go like all of the others. And believe it or not, I'm going to say the exact same thing about that Charizard from Celebrations, which is really weird for me to say. If I hadn't have put this video together, if I hadn't looked at the data myself, I would have said that is a great chase card. That is a great investment card, right? Celebrations is an anniversary set. It's got a Charizard on it. Like this is the big one right here, and you pull it in a PSA 10. That's amazing. But again, when I look at the population, over 17,000 already in a PSA 10, 65% gem rate, and the price is already at $190, like, yeah, you might gain some money over time. Of course you will. Just over time, I think organically this is going to grow. But I don't think this one is going to shoot to the moon. I still think we're going to see more PSA 10s come into the population. And so just from a pure numbers perspective, remember, everything is supply and demand. And the reason both of these are sub 200 is because there is so many in the market right now. And I think there's going to be more. So awesome cards, awesome for Charizard collectors. But if you're asking me from a pure investment perspective, I think there's other places where you're going to see your money grow, grow, grow. Now, speaking of places you're going to see your money grow, 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 these two Giratina cards jumped off the page at me. Now, I was not surprised about the Lost Origin card, but the Crown Zenith card one was actually super surprising to me. So starting with Lost Origin, you all know how much I freaking love that set. I absolutely love this card. I was shocked to see that there's only 3,538 of these in a PSA 10. And out of all of those 20 cards, remember, we went from Vivid Voltage all the way to the very end of the era, freaking Crown Zenith right here, right? We looked at that and we did the PSA 10 percentage. So the total versus the number in PSA 10, that Giratina right there is the hardest one to grade, with only 48% of the total number resulting in PSA 10s. That is something that is very important to understand, and that is because there will be more Lost Origin purchased, right? There will be more Lost Origin ripped, but when you think about it, only 48% of the very best of the best, remember, people don't say send crud to PSA, only 48% of the best that gets sent to PSA are going to result in a PSA 10. That's powerful. That's amazing. Like, that's super important information for us to understand, because this card's already at $561. And hey, I'm a big believer in buy what will go up, not what has gone up. But when I think about all of these things, when I think about the awesomeness of the Sword and Shield era as a whole and how Lost Origin is undeniably one of the better sets, this one has the opportunity in my mind to actually grow in value over time. If that price remains where it is right now, and if the population doesn't increase by much, I think over the next couple of years it could actually grow a little bit. And hey, I actually like the Crown Zenith version too. You know, Crown Zenith has been out for over a year now, I think 13 months, right? And a lot of this product has been ripped. When this came out, it was one of the most favorite products to rip. Hits were great, hits were fire, like it was an amazing set. I ripped a ton with my family, but there's still only 5,000 of these, and that might sound like a big number, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not. Now, I will say this, take it with a grain of salt, because there's a ton of Crown Zenith out there, right? There was a big reprint come holiday times, and there's still a lot out there in the market. So this is one I'm not spending a ton of money on. I'm not going to be putting any money into it, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on it, because if this stays like in the sub 6,000 range, 57% PSA 10 percentage, I think at $136, it's an absolute freaking steal, right? I think Crown Zenith is a great set with a very bright future. Whenever we talk about the best sets from the Sword and Shield era, Crown Zenith is always up there. This Giratina is the #1 chase card in that set, at least for now. So anyways, I think both of these cards are really awesome and worth a consideration when you're looking at spending money on a PSA 10 for long-term price appreciation. Now, getting into 3 cards right here. I did this one on purpose because these are 3 pretty awesome cards with some pretty common statistics, right? In the first column right there, you'll see that all of these are right around, 6,300, 6,900, 7,000. They're right in that, 63 to 7,000 overall population rate, right? And then when you look at the gem rate over there, you'll see 62, 68, 60%. Again, they're all pretty close. These are all big name Pokemon, right? All of these have been on the most graded character list, but we see a lot of difference in price. Now, the Mewtwo, I will call out, that is is not the big chase card from the Crown Zenith set, right? While you have Silver Tempest, the Lugia obviously is, and that Pikachu from Vivid Voltage obviously is as well, so you're going to get some price appreciation off of that. But then when you look at the Lugia versus that Vivid Voltage Pikachu, like Vivid Voltage doesn't get a ton of love, but guess what? That card, I think that card is absolute fire, believe it or not. It's just under 7,000. You've got the Lugia right there, which is already at 7,000, and spoiler alert, there's going to be a lot more Silver Tempest out there open. Now, there could still be some more Vivid Voltage. It's still available on the Pokemon Center, so I'm certainly not saying that there won't be more of these Pikachus into circulation, but it's at $203 versus the Silver Tempest Lugia, which is at $274. Like, a lot of people forget how hard it is to pull that Pikachu. And like, remember, I love cards with a story. Think about it. This Pikachu card was like at the pinnacle of the pandemic pump and flop, right? Like, when everybody was piling into Pokemon, everybody was spending ungodly amounts of money on Vivid Voltage, this Pikachu was the big chase card. So years from now, people are going to remember that. And this is a card with a story, and I really like that, especially when I compare it to peers like this Lugia from Silver Tempest and this Mewtwo from Crown Zenith. I think that all of these cards are fire, but I do think that, hey, listen, that Pikachu, I think it's a little undervalued, sitting at $200 right now. I think that's an absolute steal, and I would not mind adding a couple of those to the old collection. Now, the very next one I'm looking at right here, this is three cards that I could not talk about, right? Like, these are three of the biggest cards from the Sword and Shield era, so even though I'm not comparing them to any other ones, I thought it would be really interesting to talk about them. And first and foremost, I want to talk about the Moonbreon, because when we look at its numbers down there, the numbers don't look great. If we were just to take names aside and look at it, we'd be like, oh my God, this card has over 10,000 in a PSA 10, right? 75% of all the ones that are sent through end up in a PSA 10. Like, that is one of the absolute highest and worst rates, right? That's what we're talking about now. That means 75% of all the cards that were sent to PSA ended up in a 10 holder, right? And it's at $903. Guess what? None of that freaking matters, okay? Because it's the Moonbreon from Evolving Skies. This is where we have to layer in the collector, the investor, the hobbyist, and all of us. Listen, the Moonbreon has a bright future. I have no question about that, even though it's at 10,000. Every single month, I track the number of PSA 10s that are added, and we've seen the number of PSA 10s being added obviously dwindle over time. As that booster box gets more and more expensive, less and less of it's going to be ripped, because the odds of pulling this are really, really low, and people obviously are going to keep those sealed investments for the long term, because there's a lot of money in those. So I think that we're going to see this, you know, the PSA 10 population will slowly grow, but I don't think it's going to grow by much. And I do think that this card is going to be an awesome buy and hold for the long run. This is the big chase card from Sword and Shield. So even though there's over 10,000 in population right now, even though there's a high percentage of the ones that are sent to PSA ending up in a PSA 10 case, I still think that this card is a great one. It's too much for me. I can't spend that money on it, but I know a couple people in the Discord who have it, and I'm insanely jealous. Congratulations to you. And then, of course, you know how much I love that Gengar, right? That Gengar from Fusion Strike sitting at 5,186 population. I think that card has a strong case for good long-term price appreciation. Now, remember, you might say 5,000 is a lot, but the hopes is that the overall collecting base grows. So yes, 5,000 today might equal $400 in price, right? Because that's the equilibrium between supply and demand. But 5-10 years from now, hopefully there's more people collecting Pokemon than there is today. Plus, these cards will end up in personal collections and they won't resurface. So when you think about the available cards to buy, it's much less than 5,186, because I guarantee you there's a lot of people who have these in personal collections and they're never going to sell them. So this Gengar right here, I love this card. I love Fusion Strike. It's finally sold out in the Pokemon Center. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this card performs in the long run. And I do think that that population is just right for that card, and I think it could give some upside in the long run, especially coming in at $400. Now, the Charizard from Brilliant Stars, I'm kind of in the middle on this one, right? Like, I'm not sure where it's going to go. That 8,000 is a big number, but then again, it's a Charizard, right? And it's from Brilliant Stars, and Brilliant Stars is going to be one of the top sets from the Sword and Shield era. So can the top card that happens to be a Charizard from one of the top sets from the Sword and Shield era, can that kind of maintain this level of awesomeness where 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, I mean, let's be honest here, there's going to be more PSA 10s of these that hit the market. Can it sustain a high price point at 10,000? Is it going to give you the opportunity to grow over time? I mean, right now it's at $243, which, let's be honest, that's not a lot of money for a big Zard chase from one of the greatest sets from the Sword and Shield era, if you think about it. So if you're buying it now, you're thinking, hey, this has got to give me some long-term price appreciation. I think it's going to be interesting to watch it over time. I think if any of the cards on the bubble have the opportunity to do it and outperform, I think this Charizard can do it, especially if we see Brilliant Stars sell out here in the next couple months and then it starts to get scarce and the booster boxes start going through the roof. Then I really think that this card will have the opportunity for some strong price appreciation. I hope it stays under 10,000. If it starts getting over 10,000 in population, I'll be a little concerned about it. But either way, like Charizard, great set, great era. Really hard to bet against that. So with that being said, listen, I had a ton of fun digging through this data. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments down below because I can do more stuff like this. I think it's really important to look at pricing and population and then the rate, the gem rate, right? And understanding how all of that plays into the potential for future price appreciation. Now, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen, but it sure is a ton of fun to layer some data into it. So, hey, if you enjoy this kind of content, hit that subscribe button. Questions or comments, drop them down below. And as always, if you like what you see, give us a big old thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an epic one, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.